it will be taken by Sri Srivastava, Senior DDG and Head of NTIPRIT. Friends, just a quick, you can say, about information about our Senior DDG, sir. He has got variety of exposure. He has served in Telecom Engineering Center. Here he was involved in standard setting for the telecom sector, whether it is protocols to uphold confidentiality of information, whether it was interface. He has served in ITU also, and he worked in TRAI also, where he was associated with the work of data privacy and giving recommendations on the PDP bill. So friends, we are honored to have with him to take the first session. With this, may I request Sri Srivastava sir to help us know more about the TRAI recommendations and fundamentals of data privacy. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Balaji. Is the slide visible?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you very much. You called it a technical session, but the session is not technical. It deals with law actually. The whole concept of data privacy and ownership deals with law. So ladies and gentlemen, once again, welcome. I said in my introductory speech that data privacy is a very important aspect we have to consider in today's world. And as I said, 31st of March this year, we conducted a webinar wherein we talked in detail as to what data privacy is. So, and as I said that some of you would not have attended that program, so I have to give a little bit of introduction to the concepts, so as to bridge the gap between those who have attended and those who have not attended the previous webinar. That is one. And second is that we are trying to understand what is the framework that is being used by the financial sector for concept of consent management, and we have to also see the recommendations of TRAI, which are not which were not covered in original recommendation of Justice Sri Krishna. So there are certain issues that we are going to discuss, and our idea is to make everyone aware that this is how the finance sector is managing the consent management. So let us see how it can be incorporated in telecommunications sector. All of you know some of these very important points. There has been quantum leap in the quantity and the value of data being generated through use of telecom, internet services, devices, and applications. The data is being collected by all the service providers, and they collect the data, they store the data, they analyze the data, and this data analytics has become a vital tool for all the providers. And this data is collected. How it is collected? It is by businesses as a byproduct of users' interaction with them. For example, you go to any website. When you go to the website, you share your personal details, your age, your name, your sex, their address, their qualification. There are many things that you share with them, and they quietly store that data for future analytics. And so therefore, this data, of course, is enabler for more efficient services, not just by the private sector, but also by the government sector. So we must understand that this storage of data and data analytics is not a bad thing. It's a very good thing. Only problem is that we should know who owns the data. So there is a concept of data principle. Data principle, the definition will come subsequently. So basically the individual who is sharing his data, he is the master of his data, should not be misused without his consent. So therefore the concept of consent management, which will be discussed during the course of this webinar. We are generating about 2.5 quintillion bytes of data per day world over. This is a rather old statistics. I was trying to lay my hands at the latest one, but this is the only I got that TRAI had quoted in 2017 itself. quintillion is 10 to the power 9 of gigabytes. So gigabyte multiplied by gigabyte becomes a quintillion. So that kind of, data is being generated. And as I said, it is 2017 data, and as of middle of 2021 must have grown at least twofold. So data is being collected by various businesses and agencies as a byproduct, I said, and whenever you interact with them, you go to Google, you try to search something, you leave your digital imprint. Some information you have left. And that is how you must have noticed that you go to one of the sites searching for flight from here to Lucknow, and there are a number of sites which you open, you find the suggestions for Delhi to Lucknow flights. Why does it come? Because the websites are storing the data and using it for the purpose of marketing. Informational privacy is a subset of the broader concept of privacy. There has been talk about privacy. Our member are also talking about fundamental rights with regard to privacy. Privacy is the physical privacy that you stand in a room and nobody should peep into your window and door, and that's one kind of privacy. But it is the informational privacy in which your vital data should not be shared without your knowledge and without your consent. That is important. Because what harms can it do if your informational privacy is not maintained? If there is an identity theft, perhaps you may be implicated somewhere if your digital identity is stolen. It could lead to your financial loss, because if your ID and password is stolen by somebody may defraud you through from your bank account and so on and so forth. There could be loss of reputation and dignity. Somebody may implicate you without you being present at a scene of a crime or whatever. Similarly, there could be mental disturbances to you. There should be physical harm to you. There should be discrimination with regard to your eating habit, your sexual preferences, and things like that. So it causes serious harm to you. Therefore, the informational privacy has become a very important aspect of our day-to-day dealing in this society. And every government has become very, very careful and strict about this. Luckily, our government is equally concerned about this particular issue. Now, in this concept of data protection, it is important to establish the ownership of data. We have to establish first of all who owns the data. It should not happen that when I share my information with somebody, he should say, no, the data now belongs to me. It doesn't belong to him. You will see when the law is discussed here during the webinar, you will understand that a lot of weightage has been placed on ownership of data. The data belongs to the individual, and without the knowledge and consent of the individual, data should not be misused. So therefore, there is very strong rationale of government intervention in this particular issue, and why I will explain. First of all, there is an information asymmetry. What is information asymmetry? You are an individual. You don't know what is the value of your data. You underestimate as an individual, as a consumer, about value of your personal data and the scale of the use of that data. Whereas the agency that is, or business that is taking your data, it knows the value. So there is an asymmetry. They know how much is the value of your data, whereas you are not aware. So there is an information asymmetry. This has to be bridged through the government intervention. The other one is the bounded rationality. Sometimes when you give the data, you give the personal data for a small purpose. You visit a mall, he says that there's a lucky draw, you just give your name, address, telephone number, etc. But you don't know where it is going to be shared. So you do not know that you have, once you have shared the data, it is being used on long-term basis by multiple agencies and businesses. So government has to intervene on this issue too. And the third is the data monopoly. This is very important, as today Google holds a lot of data, Facebook has a lot of data. Lot of information is with WhatsApp, Twitter, all of them, the so-called digital companies, they are fighting with individual governments So this data monopoly creates monopoly in the business also. What it does is that it disturbs the balance in the business doing of business itself. Therefore, government has to intervene in this, and also perhaps there will have to be what is called as data portability, so that once this data can be ported and shared with other businesses on equal basis, so that everyone becomes equal. Otherwise, this monopoly will create business monopoly too, and it will create imbalance in the market itself. So these are the three reasons why it's very important for government to intervene. Now, as far as telecom sector is concerned, we are controlling the telecom service providers through various acts and laws. First of all, the Indian Telegraph Act. Indian Telegraph Act places, there are a number of things, of course, I have taken out only very important and salient features of the act with regard to the data protection. Restriction on any telegraph officer, which includes any person employed by a license holder, from altering, intercepting, or diverging the consents of any message except as required by law. So there is a lot of restriction placed for sharing of individuals' data. Second is the license agreement. Anyway, the license flows from the Telegraph Act itself, but there are a number of restrictions placed on the telecom service providers with regard to sharing of data. An obligation on licensing to ensure the protection of privacy of communication and to ensure that unauthorized interception of message does not take place. Remember, so whatever calls or messages you give, it should not be shared with anyone else. The second is the licensee is only permitted to divulge or use such information insofar as it is necessary in the course of providing its services, and information should only be sought to the extent necessary for the purpose of providing services to the concerned person. The service provider should not seek all kind of information from the subscriber. He has to seek only those bare minimum data from the customer which is required for providing the service. The exceptions to these conditions apply when the party has consented in writing or when the information is already open to the public. So restrictions are there. The third important bullet is the license agreement also contains certain provisions relating to encryption of data. It restricts the licensee from employing bulk encryption equipment in its network and provides that use of encryption by the subscriber shall be governed by the government policy rules made under IT Act, which authorizes the central government to set encryption standards. Basically provide encryption, but encryption has to be managed by the government rules and regulations and instructions. This is what it says. IT Act also provides for certain restrictions with regard to the telecom service providers. You already know that 43A, it provides the corporate that possesses, deals, handles any sensitive personal data or information in a computer resource is required to maintain reasonable security practices and procedures relating to such data. It will be liable to pay compensation to affected person in case of negligence in implementing such measures resulting in wrongful loss or wrongful gain to any person. So you can understand that the IT Act also is very clear as far as data privacy is concerned. In the digital eco-service system, we have a lot of players. We have the telecom service providers. Telecom service providers, as you know, they have the data of all the call records are maintained by them. All the messages, of course, are not stored, but it can also be viewed and things like this. So there are a lot of data that flows through the telecom service providers, and they are holding the data. Of course, they don't share because of the previous slide that I explained what are the restrictions on them vis-a-vis sharing data. Then the communication networks. The communication networks also are involved in sharing of, storing of data, for example, servers, etc. And when your communication passes to the network, the data is duplicated and stored at many points. Your personal devices, the mobile handset, tablet, personal computers, everywhere you are storing your personal data. And mobile handset particularly, it stores a lot of data because we are becoming habitual of doing most of our communications through mobile handset, and we are leaving a lot of digital footprint whenever we communicate. I will explain this further in subsequent slides. M2M devices. Now, machine-to-machine communication is going to be very important in the sense that it will share your health data, it will share your educational data. It can, for example, if you are using a Fitbit or MI, band, etc., it gives the data to a server, and first of all, it goes to the application that is downloaded on your mobile handset, and from there it may be sending to server, etc. Sometimes when you travel and at the end of the travel you get a mail from Gmail saying that during the month you have visited these places, these eateries, these monuments, and so on and so forth. How does it happen? It happens because they are constantly tracking you. So M2M also, when there is proliferation of M2M, the data protection is going to be very, very important aspect of that communication. Then the browsers. The browsers also record a lot of information. So first of all the browsing history is recorded. Apart from that, there are a lot of details about your devices itself, which are there on your browser. Of course, we do conduct certain webinars and trainings on how to protect your privacy, how to protect fraud when you are dealing with your machines, but that's a separate chapter. But for now, I'm just trying to highlight what are the risks where all you leave your imprint. Operating systems, your simple operating system, your mobile operating system, Android or iOS, they store a lot of data, they transfer a lot of data. You are not aware where all this data is going. For example, there was a recent study, I was watching it on BBC, and the BBC journalist, he switched off his mobile location thing on the mobile, and still he visited a lot of places, and he was able to go into the operating system and try to find out where all you visited, and everything was there for everyone to see. It was there on the BBC, and that means this data is collected by Google. So these operating systems are no Mahatmas. They are also taking a lot of data from you. Then the over-the-top services, you already know there is so much of dispute with regard to WhatsApp and sharing of data by WhatsApp. All of you are aware. Similarly, there are a number of applications on the top and applications, etc., which are collecting your data. Then apps. When you switch on an app, when you install an app, you have to share a lot of data, and this data is simply used and misused. Now, what are the sources? This is an extension of what I said in the previous slides. One is that there are cookies and fingerprinting. Now, these cookies are small files, typically consisting of letters and numbers, and they allow the website to identify the users. So it appears to be a very simple, benign thing, a small software that goes and used. Normally, nowadays, the cookie policy also comes. That earlier it was not coming. Now, when you open a website, you get a cookie policy, or to say yes or no, whatever. So now the permission is being taken. But what does this cookie do? It identifies your device, but slowly it starts doing the fingerprinting, in the sense that it will also start collecting information with regard to your, your browsing habit, etc. And it not just the identification of user. So this is how the details are collected from you. The cookies have started taking permission from you because of the European law, which is called GDPR. Maybe somebody will mention about it. This is general data protection rules, which has been incorporated in European Union. So because of that, most of the international sites, they forewarn you that cookie is there. But otherwise, over such a long time, we have been using and browsing using our computers, and we have never found anybody guiding us or alarming us or telling us that cookies are there. So they have been tracking our movements. There are tracking techniques. There are various tracking techniques and device fingerprinting. This device fingerprinting is the method that uses various information elements transmitted by a device in order to identify it. So in this process, there are different softwares, platforms, APIs, and each of them will try to access to different information elements stored in the device and all. There are web browsers, JavaScript itself, API, for example, it can provide information relating to the screen size, the color depth, available system font, etc. All this information it can take. And there are other APIs also which request to access information elements stored in your operating system, for example. So this way, there's a lot of information with regard to your surfing habit, etc., which are being collected. Then there are apps. The apps thing I had mentioned in the previous slide also, but here I would like to say that whenever you install an app, the app will first of all ask your contact details. It will ask access to your camera. It will ask access to media. It will ask access to reading your messages also. And you don't realize. Normally, we don't realize, and we say yes, 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 because we somehow want to start using the application. But sometimes when you say no, it accepts. And sometimes when you know, if you say no, it may not allow you to install the app itself. Now, in the one of the papers of TRAI, it was quoted that if you install a simple LAMP application, it will ask your media files. Why should it ask your media files? Why does it require to use your, let us say, camera? But they are asking because that's the only way they are collecting data and making money. Okay, that there are controlled by devices. The device manufacturers, some of them have been found to be installing certain softwares, and these softwares are used for monitoring your movement, monitoring your data, etc., which can be harmful to the user. Then there are platforms and operating systems. When you go your operating system, just I gave an example. Primarily, there are three very important operating systems of your devices. One is Android, second one is iOS, the third one is Microsoft. And in all the cases, what is happening? They are taking a lot of data from you and monitoring your movement, etc. And where all they are sharing the data, you do not know. You go to certain websites and platforms, there you try to share your data. You are not sure. You know, nowadays Google says, should I use the password stored by you? This is one this thing you come across. And suppose you share the password, God knows what happens to that password subsequently. How many people start viewing that? How the loss of data happens. So these are all the sources through which the personal data is collected. Then the other people. This is another very interesting. When you download an application and you say the application asks permission for sharing your contact details, you say yes. So when you share your data, somebody else's name and details, they are being shared by you unknowingly. So it's like a passive smoker. You are smoking and somebody else becomes a passive smoker. This is what happens. The data of Truecaller is a crowdsourced data. When I install Truecaller in my device, when I say yes to sharing of data, that means all those people, without their knowledge, have shared their data to Truecaller. So these are all the sources through which the personal data is being. But then, as I said in the beginning, it is not bad. Collection of this data is not bad. But only thing is, it should not harm the individual. So that we have to find a balance between business and privacy. There are increasing number of devices connected to the IP network. Therefore, personal data will be collected. We cannot stop it. But we have to utilize this personal data by doing proper analytics for problem solving. You know, if we use it for solving, let us say, the present crisis of this infection and pandemic, then perhaps it's a good thing. It was Similar thing was used when last phase of this pandemic, people were moving from one place to another place. The CDR data was helpful in finding out how many people went to which state, how many kilometers, and so on. So if it is used for problem solving, it is fine. It should be used for targeted delivery of benefits to people. Okay. It should be used for launching new products and services to the market. For example, if a company is collecting data with regard to health of people, it will be possible for them to offer very good, insurance packages and plans. It should be used for that, but it should not be used to harm individuals. That is what is the precaution to take. The technology, though beneficial to the mankind in general, does have collateral disadvantage. So that is what I said, that it should not affect the loss of privacy of individuals. So protect individuals from entities operating in digital service ecosystem and external agents. Protect them so that the individuals are not put to loss. Now what happened? So this was the importance of data privacy. There are certain actions which have taken place over a period of time. I am giving the timelines. 31st of July 2017, the constitution of Justice Sri Krishna Committee. The committee was set up to go into the details of data privacy, data protection, and recommend a draft law to the government. So those who attended our 31st March program, they are very much familiar with this. 9th of August 2017, Telecom Regulatory Authority came out with a consultation paper on this issue of data privacy, protection, ownership, etc. Now you can understand that even before 31st July, when the Sri Krishna Committee was constituted, the work on consultation paper was going on, because normally it takes 2 to 3 months to prepare a consultation paper. So before that itself, the regulator was aware that this is an important issue worldwide and we have to start working on it. 27th of November 2017, a white paper was released titled Data Protection Framework for India, which was from the Committee of Experts. The Committee of Experts was that Justice Sri Krishna Committee, and they wanted a wider public consultation. They did wider public consultation by placing it on their website, and also, there were public hearing, etc. 16th July 2018, TRAI came out with the recommendations, and 27th July 2018, the committee, Justice Sri Krishna Committee, came out with this recommendation. And on the basis of this recommendation, government formulated the draft bill, which is in the parliament, and it is called the Personal Data Protection Bill 2009. Why I'm bringing the TRAI recommendation in this midst? Because TRAI has focused on certain very important aspects relating to the telecom, and therefore I would like to highlight those important points during the course of my presentation. Now we are talking about the bill itself, the bill of 2019, which I just mentioned here. What are the provisions? Very small details about it, and I'll not take much time. The data protection grew out of public concern about personal privacy in the face of rapidly developing computer technology. So as the technology is proliferating, availability of broadband internet is expanding, people are coming more and more onto the internet and broadband platforms and leaving their digital imprints there, personal information there. It has become very important that their personal data is properly protected. So therefore the bill, it works in two ways. It gives certain rights to individuals, number one, and second is it obligates those who record and use personal information to be open about that use. So there is, first of all, rights given to individuals, and then obligations on those who store the data and operate on them. Personal data. There are certain definitions. I am just quickly I'll run through. Personal data shall be all data relating to a natural person, including data from which an individual may be identified or identifiable either directly or indirectly. So therefore, if you collect the personal data, if you collect data of large number of persons, you have to do what is called as data anonymization. through the process of data anonymization, there are various techniques for those data anonymization. Through that technique, you make sure that the individual is not identified from the data available. Of course, today people say that only with 3 or 4 attributes it is possible to find out who the individual is from among large amount of data. But all the same, I'm sure when AI is introduced in big way, from large amount of data, it should be possible to identify an individual by doing data mining. But let us not go into the technical details. Let us understand that personal data, how what it means and how it has to be protected. Processing is defined broadly as the performance of operations on personal data and will include inter alia, collection, storage, retrieval, usage, disclosure, transfer, structuring, alignment, or combination, indexation, and erasure. Getting more complicated. All right. But what it means is when you collect large information of data, you do the data processing, and basically this is what all it is included in that data processing. Sensitive personal data. Now, the sensitive personal data is a very important term all of you should understand. It's already provided for in the IT Act 2000 and maybe little bit of expansion, and this may be further expanded. I'm going to explain to you. The sensitive personal data should include passwords, financial data, health data, official identifier, sex life, sexual orientation, biometric and genetic data, and data that reveals transgender status, intersex status, caste, tribe, religious or political beliefs, or affiliations of an individual. All these are sensitive data, and this whole data protection spins around this very important term. The DPA will be given the residuary power to notify further categories in accordance with the criteria set by law. The DPA is the term used for Data Protection Authority. The Data Protection Bill 2019 called for setting up of Data Protection Authority, something like the Telecom Regulatory Authority. So there will be an authority which will manage the whole issue of data protection in the country. So the DPA has been given power to further classify this sensitive personal data. Data fiduciary is a term which is used for any person, including the state, a company, any juristic entity, or any individual who alone or in conjunction with others determines the purpose and means of processing of personal data. The term is going to be used in more detail today, so let me restrict only up to this. The next term is the data principle, the natural person to whom personal data belongs, that is you, I, and you, and it could be an individual, it could be a Hindu undivided family to which the data belongs, so they will be called data personal principle in this law. And they are data processors, any person, including the state or company, any juristic entity or any individual who processes personal data on behalf of data fiduciary, but does not include an employee of the data fiduciary. So it's an independent organization which will be processing data. All right, quickly, the data will cover processing of personal data by both public and private entities. So just remember that public entity have not been let loose. Even they are accountable when they are processing the data. The bill administers all processing of personal data within India. So therefore, data processing has to be done within India. In telecom also the restriction is there that it should not go across the border. It should be done by state, non-state or foreign entities within India. Even if the entities are foreign entities, they have to process the data within India by data fiduciaries or data processors not present within India but having connection with any business in India. So a lot of restrictions about trans-border movement of data. So data, Indians' data will remain in India. There are some exceptions. Let us not spend time on this. Now, quickly running through some 4 or 5 slides now remaining. What is different in TRAI has said many things about this. What is different in this the TRAI recommendations, which the DPA perhaps will take a look at, and they will be preparing law, regulations, etc., by which they will control it. What it means that till such time a general data protection law is notified by the government, the existing rules, license conditions applicable to telecom service providers for protection of users' privacy be made applicable to all entities in the digital ecosystem. For this purpose, the government should notify the policy framework for regulation of devices, operating systems, browsers, and applications. Basically, what the regulatory authority had said that till such time the general data protection law comes into being, whatever restrictions you have placed on the telecom service provider, ask the device manufacturers, operating systems, etc. also to follow this. This is what it meant. And then about the data privacy, it said that data minimization should be used. The minimum data amount of data should be collected by service providers, device browsers, operating systems, applications, etc. This is again was a very important thing. Of course, it is now figuring in this present bill also. But there is something with regard to operating system and browsers, etc., and devices particularly, which requires further attention. That's why I'm trying to highlight. In order to ensure sufficient choices to the users of digital services, granularities in the consent mechanism should be built in by the service provider. This is what restrictions we have tried to place on the telecom service providers. That is, if the individual gives his consent, the consent should not be blanket. There has to be granularity in that, and it should be built into that. So if I want to tell this much only, I tell only this much that should be made public, not all the details. Okay. Then, for the benefit of telecommunication users, a framework on the basis of electronic consent framework developed by MIT and the master direction of data fiduciary issued by Reserve Bank of India should be notified for telecom sector. This was said way back in 2018 itself by the Telecom Regulatory Authority. The telecom sector should also have a framework like this. There was more focus. The bill is generic, but the regulatory authority has focused more on devices. The devices should disclose the terms and conditions of use in advance before sale of the device. If you're using Apple says they are very secure. But if you need any details from them, they take the same alibi, they say they are very secure. User has no information, no rights with regard to his own data. So the device manufacturer also and the seller has to declare as to what are the terms and conditions with regard to personal use of personal data of individuals. And it should be made mandatory for the devices to incorporate provisions so that user can delete such pre-installed applications which are not part of the basic functionality of the device, if he or she so wishes. There are certain Google applications you can't delete them. You can't delete, you should, but if it is not to be used by you and not required for basic functioning of the device, why should it be there? You should be permitted to delete it. So this was the focus here. Also, there should not be prohibition in downloading on any application that user wants. The Department of Telecommunication should re-examine the encryption standards. Now, this is one very critical point. The encryption standard followed by different agencies within the government of India, they are different. The telecom uses very low level of encryption, whereas the financial sector, it uses very high level of encryption. So basically this, this slide talks about making a standard encryption, encryption is standard in the country so that there has to be enough protection as far as user and network are concerned. All entities in the digital ecosystem, including telecom service providers, should be encouraged to share information relating to vulnerabilities, threats, etc. in the digital ecosystem network to mitigate the losses and prevent recurrence. Because it is very important that they should share. There has to be a platform where these vulnerabilities are shared. Otherwise, they will keep quiet. If there is a breach of privacy or breach of data, they will keep quiet. It should not be punishment-based system. The system should encourage the players on the digital ecosystem to share the vulnerability with each other so that it can be properly fenced for future. All entities in the digital ecosystem, including telecom service providers, to transparently disclose information about the privacy breaches on their website, along with the actions taken for mitigation and preventing such breaches in future. And therefore, a common platform should be created for sharing of information relating to data security breach incidences by all entities in the digital system. The present bill also mentioned it, but this is going slightly beyond what the bill has said. Therefore, I try to highlight this issue. And lastly, the data security breaches will take place in spite of adoption of best practices, necessary measures taken by the data collectors and processors. Sharing of information concerning data security breaches should be encouraged and incentivized to prevent, mitigate such occurrences in future. So it is very, very important that we should encourage people, these entities, to share the information with regard to any breaches that happened in the past. So these are all the issues that I wanted to share with you, ladies and gentlemen. With this, I close my presentation. Thank you very much, and there will be certainly questions. So we will take those questions as Mr. Balla suggests subsequently. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for sharing insight about data privacy concept and TRAI major recommendation.